You haven't even heard of him. So, you think you know who the richest person in the world is. You've seen the headlines, you've heard the names. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. These guys have so much money, it's hard to even imagine. We talk about them launching rockets into space, buying social media companies, or owning gigantic mansions. Their wealth is the stuff of modern legend, a number with so many zeros it looks like a typo. We measure their fortunes in billions, and we follow their every move as if they are characters in a blockbuster movie. But let me tell you something. What if I told you the richest person who ever lived makes these guys look like they're shopping with pocket change? Seriously, I'm not kidding. This person was so wealthy that his story sounds completely made up. It sounds like something out of a comic book or a fairy tale. But it's real. This man's fortune was so vast, so enormous, that we can't even properly calculate it today. Economists and historians have tried, and they just end up shrugging their shoulders because the numbers get too big to make sense. He wasn't just billionaire rich. He breaks the global economy by being generous rich. Forget private jets. This man traveled with a caravan so long it took days to pass. His story is more incredible than any modern tale of riches because it's not just about money. It's about a kingdom, a journey, and a legacy that literally changed the map of the world. His name was Mansa Musa, an African king from the 14th century. And his story is one of the most incredible, mind-blowing, and criminally overlooked chapters in human history. We're going to dive into this story, and I promise you, by the end, you'll be asking yourself one simple question: how on earth did I not know about this? This isn't just a fun fact to share at a party. This is a story that challenges what we think we know about history, about Africa, and about where real power and influence came from. It's a tale of unimaginable wealth, epic adventure, and a legacy that has been whispering through the ages, waiting for us to finally listen. So buckle up, forget everything you thought you knew about the world's richest people. We are about to take a trip back in time to the Mali Empire, a place overflowing with gold, knowledge, and power. This isn't just a history lesson, it's the rediscovery of a legend. We're going to talk about a king who sailed into the unknown, a pilgrimage that showered a continent with gold, and cities that became shining beacons of learning and culture. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the man who had it all, gave a lot of it away, and in doing so, put his African empire on the world map forever. And it all starts with the king who came before him, a man with a dream so big it stretched across the entire Atlantic Ocean. Before Mansa Musa became the legendary king we know, there was another ruler of the Mali Empire. This was his brother Abu Bakr II. Now, Abu Bakr wasn't your typical king who was content to just sit on his throne and count his gold. No, this man was a dreamer. He was an explorer. He looked out at the vast Atlantic Ocean, which people at the time called the world's end, and he didn't see an end. He saw a beginning. He was obsessed with the idea that there was something on the other side. While everyone else was looking inland, his gaze was fixed on the horizon, wondering what mysteries lay beyond the waves that crashed on West Africa's shores. Abu Bakr became convinced that the ocean wasn't an impassable barrier. He believed it was a river, and like any river, it had another bank. This idea consumed him. So he did something that sounds absolutely crazy. He used his immense wealth to fund a massive expedition. He gathered the best shipbuilders, sailors, and navigators in his kingdom. He ordered the construction of 200 ships, filling them with enough food, water, and of course gold to last for years. He gave them one simple command: sail west, and don't come back until you've found the other side of the ocean, or until you've run out of supplies. It was a mission straight out of science fiction, but it was happening in the 1300s. Time passed, and eventually a single ship returned. The captain was the only survivor. He told the king a harrowing story. He said the fleet had sailed for a long, long time, until they came to a powerful current in the middle of the ocean, like a massive river. One by one, the other ships were pulled into this current and disappeared. Frightened, this captain turned his ship around and sailed home. Did this discourage Abu Bakr? Not at all. In fact, it only made him more determined. He believed the other ships had found something, and he decided he had to see it for himself. He was a king who preferred adventure over the comfort of his palace. So, in the year 1311, Abu Bakr II did the unthinkable. He decided to lead the next expedition himself. He gathered an even bigger fleet, this time with 2,000 ships filled with men, women, and supplies for colonization. He appointed his brother Musa to rule as regent in his absence. Then, he and his massive fleet sailed west into the great unknown, disappearing over the horizon forever. Abu Bakr II was never seen or heard from again. Did he and his fleet perish in the Atlantic? Or, as some historians and scholars now theorize, did they actually make it? Did this African king and his people reach the Americas almost 2 centuries before Christopher Columbus? The mystery remains, but his departure left the throne of the world's richest empire open for his brother. With his brother gone, sailing off into a legend, Musa was no longer just a temporary ruler. He was now the Mansa, the king, the emperor of Mali. And the empire he inherited was staggering in its scale and wealth. This wasn't some small, isolated kingdom. The Mali Empire was a sprawling superpower that covered a huge chunk of West Africa. To give you a modern idea, imagine an empire that stretched over modern-day Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Niger, and more. It was bigger than Western Europe at the time. It was a dominant force, controlling trade routes, commanding large armies, and holding immense political power across the region. Musa wasn't just a king, he was the CEO of a continent-spanning corporation. The source of this incredible power was under the ground. The Mali Empire sat on top of some of the richest gold deposits the world has ever known. Historians believe that during Musa's reign, the empire was responsible for producing more than half of all the gold in the entire Old World. Let that sink in. Every second gold coin or piece of jewelry being traded in Europe, Asia, or North Africa likely came from the mines of Musa's empire. This wasn't just wealth, it was a strategic monopoly on the most desired commodity on the planet. While European kingdoms were fighting each other over scraps of land, Mansa Musa was sitting on a literal mountain of gold. It's almost impossible to overstate just how rich this made him. When people try to calculate his wealth in today's dollars, the numbers break the system. Some say $400 billion. Others say it's a pointless exercise because his wealth was simply too great to be quantified. Think of it this way. Today's billionaires have their wealth tied up in stocks, in companies whose values go up and down. Mansa Musa's wealth was in pure physical gold. He had so much of it that the very concept of its value was different to him. He was the source. He didn't need to check the stock market, he was the stock market. His control over this resource gave him power that no leader today could possibly dream of. And so, Mansa Musa, the man who became king by accident, found himself at the helm of this golden juggernaut. He was a devout Muslim, and as his power grew, so did his desire to fulfill one of the most important duties of his faith, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. But a king like Mansa Musa wasn't going to make this journey quietly. He was going to make a statement. He was going to show the world the power and glory of the Mali Empire. He decided to embark on a journey that would stretch for thousands of miles, and he was going to take a little bit of his kingdom's wealth with him. This decision would change history and echo for centuries. In the year 1324, Mansa Musa set out from his capital on a journey that the world would never forget. This was no simple trip. This was the Hajj, a sacred pilgrimage to Mecca, but it was done on a scale that was simply breathtaking. His caravan was not just a group of travelers, it was a moving city of gold. Imagine a procession so long that when the first people were arriving at their destination for the night, the last people were just setting out from the previous camp. Contemporary accounts written by people who saw it with their own eyes describe a caravan that included 60,000 men. This wasn't just an entourage, it was an entire army, a court, and a support staff, all on the move. The procession was led by 500 heralds, all dressed in the finest Persian silk, and each carrying a staff made of pure gold. These men were there to announce the king's arrival. Following them were the soldiers, the officials, the doctors, and the teachers. But the most spectacular part of this caravan was the part dedicated to carrying the treasure. There was a train of 80 to 100 camels, and each camel was loaded with up to 300 pounds of pure gold dust. Do the math. That's thousands upon thousands of pounds of gold, just for travel expenses. This wasn't treasure locked away in chests. It was a river of gold flowing across the Sahara Desert. Think about the logistics of this. Moving tens of thousands of people and animals across one of the harshest environments on Earth is a monumental feat even today, with all our modern technology. Mansa Musa did it in the 14th century. They built mosques along the way every Friday wherever they happened to stop. They had to transport enough food and water for everyone. This wasn't just a display of wealth, it was a masterclass in organization, planning, and raw power. The sheer spectacle of it all was designed to leave no doubt in anyone's mind about the greatness of his empire. It was a rolling advertisement for Mali, and it was working perfectly. As this golden city moved across Africa, word of its coming spread like wildfire. Rulers of other lands and merchants on the trade routes were stunned. Nothing like this had ever been seen before. It was a sight that inspired awe, envy, and disbelief. For the people who lived along the route, it must have seemed like a dream. Every person in the caravan, from the highest official to the lowest servant, was catered for. This journey wasn't just about getting to Mecca. It was about putting Mali on the world map, and Mansa Musa was using his incredible wealth as the ink. The world was about to see what happens when the richest man in history decides to be generous. After months of traveling across the vast Sahara, Mansa Musa's incredible caravan finally arrived in Cairo, Egypt. At the time, Cairo was one of the most important and powerful cities in the world, a major center for trade and culture. The Sultan of Egypt, Al-Nasir Muhammad, heard about this powerful king from the south and sent a diplomat to greet him, inviting him to the palace. Initially, Musa was hesitant, saying he was only passing through on his way to Mecca, but eventually he agreed to meet the Sultan. When he arrived, he made a grand impression, not just with his entourage but with his deep knowledge and dignified presence. But it was his generosity that would truly make history. During his 3-month stay in Cairo, Mansa Musa gave away gold. He didn't just give a little, he flooded the city with it. He gave gold to the poor he met on the streets. He gave gold to government officials. He gave gold to the merchants in the bustling markets. He spent and gave away so much gold that he single-handedly changed the value of money in the entire region. Imagine one person handing out so much cash today that every bank in a country suddenly found its currency was worth less. That's exactly what happened. The price of gold plummeted in Cairo and it stayed low for more than a decade. He had disrupted the economy of an entire nation simply by being generous. This act had massive consequences. The value of everything else from bread to silk skyrocketed as people tried to adjust to the sudden influx of gold. This is a basic economic principle called inflation, and Mansa Musa caused it on an epic scale. For years after he left, the markets in Cairo and even in Mecca and Medina were in chaos. It took the region over 12 years to fully recover from his visit. This story was recorded by numerous Arab scholars and historians of the time like Al-Umari, who documented the economic fallout in detail. They wrote about it with a sense of wonder and bewilderment. Who was this African king who could wield wealth with such world-altering power? On his way back from Mecca, Mansa Musa passed through Cairo again. When he saw the economic damage his generosity had caused, he tried to fix it. In a move that, honestly, no economist would ever recommend, he tried to take the gold back out of the economy. He borrowed back all the gold he could from the merchants in Cairo at incredibly high rates of interest. He was essentially trying to soak up the excess gold he had poured into the city. This act is just as legendary as his spending. It shows that he not only had the power to crash an economy, but also had enough financial might to single-handedly try to prop it back up. His visit left an indelible mark, a story told for generations about the king whose kindness was so great it broke a country. So, the big question is, how could any person or any empire become this wealthy? I mean, it honestly seems to defy logic. But the answer, well, it lies in geography and the unique trade dynamics of medieval West Africa. The Mali Empire was perfectly positioned between two of the most vital resources of the era, gold and salt. The southern regions of Musa's empire, in places like Bambouk and Bur, were home to these massive gold fields. This was the source, the fountain of wealth that basically supplied the world. But in the north, across the vast Sahara Desert, there was another treasure that in some places was just as valuable as gold. That treasure was salt. Now you might think of salt as something simple you sprinkle on your food, but in the 14th century, it was a strategic resource. In the sweltering heat of sub-Saharan Africa, salt was essential for human survival. It was used to preserve food, especially meat, which was crucial in a time before refrigeration. It was also vital for replenishing the body's electrolytes lost through sweat. Basically, people needed salt to live. The great salt mines like those at Tagaza in the middle of the Sahara were effectively producing white gold. Giant slabs of salt were cut from the earth and transported by camel caravans south into the heart of the Mali Empire where salt was actually scarce. Mansa Musa's genius, and really the genius of the Mali Empire, was that they controlled the middle ground. They controlled the trade routes where these two vital commodities met. The gold came from the south, and the salt came from the north. The empire acted as the ultimate middleman, taxing every transaction. Gold flowed north to the merchants of North Africa and Europe, while salt flowed south to the people of the savannah and forests. In the markets of Timbuktu and Gao, traders would famously exchange salt for gold, sometimes at a 1-to-1 ratio by weight. Imagine being able to trade a pound of table salt for a pound of pure gold. That was the economic reality that fueled Musa's empire. This control over the trans-Saharan trade was the engine of Mali's economy. Mansa Musa didn't just own the gold mines, he owned the entire supply chain. He controlled the flow of goods, set the prices, and ensured the safety of the caravans, which made his empire the preferred trading partner for merchants from across the known world. This created a cycle of immense and ever-growing wealth. The more gold they traded, the more powerful they became. And the more powerful they became, the more they could control the trade. It was a perfect system that allowed Mansa Musa to accumulate a fortune so large that it remains legendary to this day. This story sounds so fantastic that it's easy to wonder if it's just a myth, like a tall tale passed down through generations. But the story of Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire is not a fairy tale. It's actually a well-documented historical fact, supported by multiple streams of evidence from different parts of the world. One of the most compelling pieces of proof comes from the people who saw his caravan or heard about it firsthand. Arab scholars and historians living in Cairo and other parts of the Islamic world at the time, like the aforementioned Al-Umari and the famous traveler Ibn Battuta, wrote detailed accounts of Musa's pilgrimage and the immense wealth of his empire. They weren't writing fiction, they were documenting current events. These written accounts from North Africa and the Middle East are incredibly valuable because they provide an outsider's perspective. They describe the shock and awe that Musa's wealth inspired, but perhaps even more visually stunning is the evidence we find on maps. Before Mansa Musa's journey, European maps of Africa were often blank or filled with mythical creatures. After his pilgrimage, that changed. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer named Abraham Cresques created the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important world maps of the medieval period. And right in the middle of West Africa, he drew an image of a black king, wearing a golden crown, holding a golden scepter, and offering a huge gold nugget to a trader. The caption reads, "This black lord is called Musa Mali, Lord of the Blacks of Guinea." This map was a game changer. It was like a giant advertisement telling all of Europe. There is a powerful, wealthy golden empire in Africa. It put Mali, and specifically Mansa Musa, on the mental map of the medieval world. It was this depiction that helped cement his legacy internationally, sparking the curiosity and greed of European nations that would later lead to their age of exploration along the African coast. The map is tangible proof that his fame had spread far beyond the borders of his own continent. It shows that his display of wealth had exactly the effect he intended. The world was paying attention to Mali. Beyond written accounts and maps, we have archaeological and architectural evidence right in West Africa itself. The grand mosques and universities that Mansa Musa commissioned in cities like Timbuktu and Gao still stand today, in some form. The Jingwereber Mosque, for example, is a testament to the unique architectural style he sponsored, blending traditional West African mud brick techniques with designs he brought back from his pilgrimage. These buildings are physical, lasting proof of his legacy. They showed that his wealth wasn't just for showing off, it was invested back into his empire, creating lasting centers of faith and learning that transformed the region for centuries to come. While the stories of Mansa Musa's incredible wealth and his economy-breaking pilgrimage are spectacular, they're honestly not the most important part of his legacy. True greatness is not measured by what you have, but by what you build and leave behind for others. After returning from Mecca, Mansa Musa was inspired. He had seen the great cities of the Islamic world with their magnificent mosques, bustling markets, and legendary centers of learning. He decided that his own empire needed the same. He embarked on one of the most ambitious building projects in African history, with the goal of turning his cities into world-class centers of culture, religion, and education. His focus was on the city of Timbuktu. Under his patronage, Timbuktu was transformed from a simple trading post into a legendary city of scholarship. He brought back with him the best architects, scholars, and poets from across the Islamic world. He paid an Andalusian architect, Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a staggering 200 kilograms of gold to design and build the now famous Jinguereber Mosque. He also commissioned the construction of the Sankore University, which became one of the greatest centers of learning in the world. It wasn't just a university, it was a collection of independent schools, each with its own master scholar. Soon, students and scholars were flocking to Timbuktu from all over Africa and the Middle East to study law, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. The city became famous for its book trade, with manuscripts often being more valuable than any other commodity, except perhaps salt. The libraries of Timbuktu were legendary, holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. This was a place where knowledge was treasured more than gold. Mansa Musa understood that true power came not just from controlling resources, but from cultivating minds. He was building an intellectual infrastructure that would sustain his empire long after the gold mines ran dry. This is Mansa Musa's real legacy. The gold he gave away in Cairo was temporary, but the centers of learning he built in Timbuktu enriched the world for centuries. He fostered a golden age of peace, prosperity, and intellectual advancement in West Africa. He turned the Mali Empire into a beacon of knowledge that shone brightly across the globe. His story shows that wealth is just a tool. It can be used to crash an economy for a short time, or it can be used to build institutions that can elevate humanity for generations. Mansa Musa ultimately chose the latter, and that is why his story is not just about riches but about wisdom. So, after hearing this incredible story of a powerful African empire, a king who may have crossed the Atlantic before Columbus, and a fortune that makes modern billionaires look poor, you have to ask yourself a simple question. Why isn't this story more famous? Why do we learn about Roman emperors and European kings in school, but not about Mansa Musa? Why is a figure who so dramatically impacted the world, who was literally drawn onto the maps of his time, so often left out of our history books? The answer is complicated, but it's a question we really need to ask. For centuries, the writing of history has been dominated by a European perspective. The narrative we are often taught is one where history happens in Europe, and the rest of the world is just a place where Europeans go to have adventures, find resources, or civilize people. The stories of great African kingdoms, powerful Asian empires, and sophisticated American civilizations are often pushed to the margins, treated as footnotes rather than main chapters. The history of Africa, in particular, has often been wrongly portrayed as a history of poverty and conflict, ignoring the rich and complex tapestry of empires, trade, and innovation that existed for millennia. Stories like Mansa Musa's challenge this narrow view of the world. They force us to reconsider our assumptions about where wealth, power, and knowledge came from. The Mali Empire was a global superpower in its time, shaping economies and cultures far beyond its borders. Timbuktu was a world-class center of learning, when many European cities were still struggling through the Middle Ages. Forgetting or ignoring these histories is not just a disservice to the past, it robs us of a richer, more accurate understanding of our shared human story. It creates a skewed picture of the world and the contributions of all its peoples. That is why telling these stories is so important today. We need to actively seek out and share the histories that have been overlooked. The story of Mansa Musa is not just black history, it is world history. It's a story of human achievement, of vision, and of a legacy that deserves to be celebrated. It reminds us that greatness can be found everywhere, in every culture, and at every point in time. So the next time someone asks you who the richest person in history was, tell them the story of the African king who broke an economy with his generosity and built a city of knowledge in the desert. And then ask them, why didn't you know?